Potter series is something that at this point is almost impossible to escape. I mean, the book series itself is over 20 years old. It launched a successful movie franchise, which is almost at this point 20 years old, and pretty, pretty much it's almost impossible at this point to live in a world without knowing Harry Potter. I mean, you got the films, you got the books, you got the spin-off films, the Fantastic Beasts franchise, and you've even got the kind of theme parks and attractions that you can visit regarding Harry Potter, where you can visit the Great Hall, you can visit Hogsmeade, you can visit Diagon Alley, you can visit the Hogwarts Express. Harry Potter at this point is almost impossible to avoid. But yet, surprisingly, I kind of felt to myself that I hadn't actually looked back on the Harry Potter film franchise for a little while now. I mean, as I said, it's almost impossible to avoid the franchise now with how big it's become. But surprisingly, when I looked back a few days ago, I just suddenly thought to myself, I haven't actually watched the films in a while. Which I thought was odd. I mean, like I said, we all know the franchise, we know the books off by heart, but I just thought to myself, I haven't seen the films in a while. So I thought to myself, at some point this year, I'll have to kind of sit down and do a proper rewatch of the films, just get myself reacquainted with it. I decided to do so recently, and now I'm wearing my Slytherin shirt. Let's talk about the first of these films, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, released in 2001. It was released as Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone in the US for some reason. Unlike what I do with my Doctor Who reviews, I'm not going to go through the plots of these ones, mainly because you've read the books, you've seen the films, you know these films off by heart, you know them back to back. But I do also think it's worth noting on certain aspects of the films. I mean, these were big films. These launched the careers of actors like Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, Emma Watson, and Tom Felton. These were fairly small actors at the time, and now they're big names. So it's definitely a franchise worth looking back on, even if I admit the franchise isn't perfect. There are some things that they did end up leaving out, but there are also certain mistakes that are made. I mean, the mistake I noticed upon rewatching this film is, I think it's a mistake. I might be misremembering the film, even though I only saw it yesterday, but I'm pretty sure there's a mistake in the Great Hall scene. Towards about the middle of the film, when they finally arrived at Hogwarts for the first time, they're being sorted into their houses, and they're like, Ron gets sorted, and he gets placed in Gryffindor. He goes and sits at the Gryffindor table on one side of the table. I believe Hermione is on the other side. At least that's what I remember. Harry then gets sorted, and after, of course, the big thing of him choosing not to go in Slytherin, he gets sorted into Gryffindor, and I believe, if I'm remembering it rightly, he goes and he sits down at the Gryffindor table next to Ron. This is the important bit. And then, in suddenly the next shot, when the film, or the next scene of the Great Hall Feast, when the food arrives, Harry is suddenly he's still sat at the Gryffindor table, but he is no longer sat next to Ron. Ron is on the other side of the table, and Harry is now sat between Hermione and Percy. Did he move slightly? Did he decide, no, I don't want to sit next to my best friend. I'm going to go sit over there. Just like, what? But I think it's a mistake. I mean, as I said, I might be misremembering the film, but once again, that's a mistake that I thought was worth noticing. But then it's also weird looking back on this franchise because, as I said, the film series is nearly 20 years old at this point. But then it's weird to look back on it and think about how some of the actors are sadly no longer with us. I mean, as I said, this was a big film with big names. You have still got the likes of Robbie Coltrane, Michael Gambon, Dame Maggie Smith in there, but then you've also got some actors who have in the intervening years, between 2001 and 2020, now sadly passed away. The one that everyone knows was Richard Harris, who sadly passed away between Harry Potter's 2 and 3, as a result of which being replaced by Michael Gambon at the start of Prisoner of Azkaban. But you can definitely see him here, and he definitely does bring that kind of wise kindness to him, to the character, which I do feel was a very nice touch. Richard Griffiths, who played Uncle Vernon, is sadly also no longer with us. I believe he passed away in 2013. It's weird to think that a man who was so synonymous with being the kind of hateful uncle, the one who dismissed all magic, that he was apparently once lined up to become the Doctor in Doctor Who. He was one of the names considered to replace Sylvester McCoy before the show got cancelled. Which, I know this is Harry Potter, not Doctor Who, but then the other big one that we have to talk about is Alan Rickman, who did between the end of the series in 2012, I believe it was, and 2020, he has, in the interim, passed away. But he is one of the names that I believe everyone will remember for his sneering portrayal of Snape. Just, will we remember him? Always. Yeah. But then, as I said, the series isn't exactly perfect, and focusing on the first film at least, there was a lot of stuff they had to cut out that was in the books, but sadly didn't make it into the films. The three that I'll be mentioning here, one is Draco's Duel. After the big thing with Draco throwing the Remember All and Harry catching it and being made the Slytherin Seeker, Draco in the book ends up challenging him to a duel, to which Harry agrees, Ron says he serves as second, Hermione tries to stop them, but then gets locked out of the Gryffindor common room because the fat lady's gone walkabout. Neville also ends up tagging along because he forgot the password, but anyway, they find that Malfoy has set them up, as he doesn't turn up at the trophy room last night, clearly intending them to get caught by Filch. But that's how they ultimately find their way to the third floor and discover Fluffy and all the rest of it. Which is, of course, the kind of crux of that whole point. Whereas in the film, they just kind of stumble onto the third floor by accident when the staircases change, which is... It gets the story moving a bit more quickly, but it does also bring out is one of the main reasons why Hermione breaks up or has a disagreement with Harry and Ron at the first place, which is kind of the crux of the story. The second point that is worth mentioning that they changed from the books is their detention. Hagrid and the Dragon and the detention. In the film, how Draco notices them and the dragon egg through the window of Hagrid's hut, then goes to tell the teacher, Harry, Ron, Hermione get into trouble, and Hagrid is eventually forced to send the dragon away to Romania by Dumbledore, who says he can't keep it. In the book, it's a bit more complicated. He ends up raising Norbert a bit, but then Harry, Ron, and Hermione kind of work with some colleagues who work with Ron's brother Charlie in Romania to get the dragon taken away somewhere where it'll be safe. But they eventually get caught out of bed by the teachers after being tipped off by Draco. So that's another thing where they had to sacrifice quite a lot in order to get the film down to the 2.5 hours it is. The final thing, that they cut out of the book for the film, was the potion riddle. In between the giant chess match and Harry's final confrontation with Quirrell in the book is a room with a riddle set by Snape, where you have to drink a potion out of 7 different bottles, which Hermione does manage to solve with her logic. Now, they probably cut this out because, well, it's kind of a slow scene and they want to keep things moving, but it is one that does show, did Snape contribute anything to defending the stone? But, once again, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is a fine film. It has a timeless feel to it, and I feel it's one people are going to be re-enjoying for years. As I have admitted in this video, it does have problems, but you know what? The Harry Potter franchise, I don't think it's going to be dying anytime soon. And Philosopher's Stone was just the first step. It may have been 2001, and it's possibly a little dated, but not as badly as it could have been. So that's my thoughts on Philosopher's Stone. Anyway, next up, Chamber of Secrets. I'll let you know when I get to that. Till then, see ya.